Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible, the Special Needs Survival Podcast. So, you know that sometimes things go wrong, and beautiful Jenny is here having a podcast interview with me, and I was panicking a little bit, I have to say, because there are certain forms and information that I request from people ahead of time, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Somehow she sent it, I lost it. That's just kind of the way that it goes. Sometimes, though, as I mentioned in my last podcast, those are the life events that end up being the most meaningful, the unplanned events, the unscripted events, the events that go a little bit sideways. So here we are having this wonderful conversation today with Jenny. Oh, Jenny, how do you say your last name? I know I'm going to maul it.
Nechvatal.
Nechvatal. She's from Australia. She's not my first guest from Australia, but I always have to do the what time is this kind of thing. And she has a very interesting story. So, Jenny, welcome to the show. Thank you for being so patient with me as we figure out what, little gremlin in my computer ate up the documents that you sent me. But I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. It was lovely to have that chat beforehand. So it's all good.
Yes, yes. Okay, so just in case you're wondering, because I did the what time is it? It's 9 in the morning there, and I'm recording at 5 in the afternoon here in Massachusetts. So excited. So, Jenny, you have an interesting background. You come at this as a professional who's running two businesses, who wrote a book, but also as a parent. And you are the people that I love to talk to because you've got that life experience, but you're also coming at it from a professional expertise as well. Just tell us a little bit about your background, tell us about your professional background, and tell us about your kids that bring you into this disability space.
Well, let's talk about the kids first because they're always the most important, aren't they?
They are.
We have three children. So we have Kate, who's 25, and then we have twin boys who are now 22. I have to stop and think because that seems to have raced by.
I do that all the time.
So Ryan and Zach were diagnosed with level 3 autism when they were 2 years and 3 months. They're also non-verbal. They have an intellectual delay and they're incontinent. So it's been a long journey to raise them, to bring them up, to support them, to go through all those therapies and, going through all those milestones that you would see other children meet, but also our daughter met, but, they didn't meet. So each time you had to go through that grieving process. And I did do a podcast the other day and someone asked, when did you sort of fully, I guess, come into acceptance? And I said, it probably wasn't till they were probably like teenagers. And I guess it's probably not always full acceptance, but I think I really got into that place of, well, this is who they are and this is what we have, and let's just enjoy it and love it. So
don't you think you come into acceptance in layers and in milestones, really, because at this age, at 22, and that's something we're going to talk about, you have a whole different set of problems once they hit that adulthood, and then there's more things. There's more losses, but there's also more things that are different, so that acceptance, it sort of just is a rolling kind of a goal that you're reaching for.
Yes. Yeah. And we're lucky in a way. Oh, I don't know if I should say lucky. That's probably, I don't know if that's the right word. But here in Australia, we have the NDIS, which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yes.
And so Ryan and Zach actually have moved out of home. They had a unit that was built for both of them. There's sort of a group of units and sort of designed specifically for them because they love their TV. So they actually have, here they always had a TV each, so the house was built with that in mind, and they have 24-hour care as well. So they actually moved out fully in July last year. So we're going through, I guess, that empty nester period as well. And of course, that the transition was incredibly smooth because they're on the spectrum. It was they would go one night, then come home, do that for a month, 2 nights, 2 months, and it went on like that. But within 6-7 months, they were there full time.
Wow.
So yeah, that was like we were thinking, oh, will it be a year, 18 months? Our daughter was going, oh, I think it's going to take 3 years.
Wow.
guess,
I'm just
guess we
amazed.
underestimated them.
I mean, it's so different than here in the US. We don't have that flexibility. It's like, oh,
We are
you can
so
have a
lucky.
visit, you can come for dinner, and then you got to move them and they're there.
Mm.
We don't have that kind of slow
We just got the
transition.
most amazing provider that that so they worked in conjunction with a builder to build the house that was to the right specifications. And then he just has the most amazing company, and they're just so understanding and compassionate, and they knew what it would take to make it successful for Ryan and Zach, and they're looking long term. And with the funding, they were able to, claim for the time, be paid for the time that the boys were there,
Right.
and then just increase it. So it wasn't that, that wasn't sort of an issue. But they worked with us to do it that way. So there's been a lot of communication, a lot of meetings. As you always have when your kids have a disability, you have so many more meetings than anybody else ever would.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that's the family side. And then professional side, I was in the early childhood sector for over 30 years and absolutely loved that. Started as a teacher in either preschool or long daycare centres.
Mm-hmm.
Moved into being a director, so doing the managing side of it. And that was probably just before the boys were diagnosed. And I think at that time that was a good move, because being with children all the time, if I'd been with children all day teaching and then going home, I think just would have been too much. But yes, I did those management roles for a while, and then I actually went, do you know what, I've had enough of this. So she stepped back to teaching, but just did 3 days a week.
Okay.
And then the reason I wrote my book was because I was so frustrated that other educators either didn't understand why children needed that extra support when they had a disability, or didn't understand how to work with the parents or communicate with them. And that's not their fault. It's just that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So the book sort of came from that. And it was always hard when maybe I made it hard, that, having those conversations with the educators about, well, you need to do this, you need to do it this way. When you're also working with them, it's a little bit trickier, I guess. So I wrote the book, and then when I did some book launches, the educators and the managers were just asking different questions. So I've actually developed workshops out of that for them. So one is just about, how to have those hard conversations, which is a section in the book, because that is hard. And, sometimes some of those educators, they will be quite young, and sometimes they're put in those, positions of responsibility because there's a lack of staff and things like that. So, so I've developed those, and have a Autism Families Thriving membership for those families of children on the spectrum. And as we were chatting before, it's, to share the good, bad, and the ugly moments, because
they're really ugly. Yes.
Our boys actually were quite aggressive. Ryan went through a very aggressive stage, a sort of early teenagehood, and he just went out of his, and Zach went into his, and Zach is still sometimes in that phase. I've had 2 broken wrists because of being pushed over by Zach. One was really quite bad. It required surgery. And it's talking about those things. And as I mentioned before, children on the spectrum are often quite fussy about their food. So when they actually try something different, it really is a celebration. And if you say that to, any other mum that doesn't have a child on the spectrum or with a disability, they'll just sort of look at you thinking, okay, that's great. They, put a carrot in their mouth, but other mums, children on the spectrum, they will get it. So it's a space to share all those sorts of things. So.
And you've developed a company. Actually, you're running two different companies. So you mentioned the workshops that you're doing around your book for educators, which I think is fantastic. But what is the other company that you're running?
It's based around, with the NDIS, part of some of the participants' funding will be support coordination. So basically that role is to connect the participant to the services they need. And the reason I started that was when I was working with in the early childhood sort of sector, families just didn't know who to connect to. And even knowing, older people that have disabilities, or they might, be friends with their children had a disability, they didn't always know who to connect to or how to, or, didn't have the advocacy skills. And I was always really passionate when I was working with children about advocating for the parents, those ones that couldn't advocate, helping them to access the community services that they needed and those sorts of things. So it came from that I was just so tired of people not getting the services or sticking with a service that wasn't quite right for them because they didn't know what else there was.
Right.
Or unfortunately, I guess, there's good providers, bad providers, and some of those bad providers, if I want to be negative, will hold on to those participants, and not let them know what else is out there, or let them change, or things like that. They'll sort of, once they've got them, they kind of hang on to them.
I appreciate that so much. The company is Innovative Disability Solutions for anybody, and we'll have all the links in the show notes to be able to get in touch with Jenny and see all the things that she's doing. It's really interesting to me that you've developed this kind of advocacy stance, because even in a country like Australia, where first of all, there's a lot of variation in the regions, right? But it is more than many other countries, like a one-door place. You can walk through the door and then, you get your support. However, there are people who are just exhausted, who, while maybe at other points in their life might have been great advocates, but they are just grieving, or having depression, or just for whatever reason, it's too much at this time. And having that peer-to-peer, but also a peer with some chops, with this professional background, it's very helpful. Here in Massachusetts, and I think in many other parts of our country, we have something called support brokers. And they're usually run through the ARCs, the ARCs, which is it's a nonprofit, public, joint effort, a lot of the times. But it's nice because you have somebody that's been there before, but who's also got that little bit of professionalism, because you want to make sure that every family is very individual, and their path and their needs are going to be different. Whether, you have 5 families who all have level 3 autistic children, they're all going to look different, and they're all going to have different needs. So mapping out that plan, is not cookie cutter.
No.
By the way, that reminds me, can you tell us about the levels of autism and what that means?
Well, it's interesting because when the boys were first diagnosed, it was basically, back then it was just autism spectrum disorder.
Yes.
And Asperger's was still used quite a bit. And I guess how they described our boys was that they were severe. And then, the levels of autism came in, and I probably didn't use them for a while because to me it didn't make any difference to their diagnosis. I mean, it was
Right.
probably like teenagehood. Um, so probably off the top of my head, because to be honest, yeah, I've never really looked into it all that much. Level one is, I guess, probably quite mild. It might be just a slight delay in that communication and the social skills. That's usually what, you know, the
Mhm.
two areas with autism. Um, the level two, I guess, what you used to call moderate. So they may
Mhm.
be more may find it harder to communicate. They might need, sort of a device to help them to communicate those sorts of things. Routine, that need for routine just goes through all
Right.
levels. That never changes with autism, and that is absolutely huge, and that really needs to be recognised by, I guess, by everybody. And in the level two, the sensory sort of aspects
Mhm.
come into it as well. And then level three, it will be certainly sort of all the aspects. So it's the speech, the communication, the sensory levels, and sometimes that's where that aggression
Yeah.
comes in. And the food sensitivities are probably, I guess, with autism, every child or every adult is different. So some may have food sensitivities, some may not, but quite
Right.
often that will be in each level as well.
Mhm.
Sometimes level one, it might be that they might just not like a particular food. Um, Other
Right.
times it might be that they just don't like certain textures.
Mhm.
We found Ryan used to like really crunchy foods when he was little, and Zach wasn't at all fussed. Whereas Zach liked all the sweet sort of things and soft things. Zach will eat banana, but Ryan won't. But if you put it in a muffin, he'll eat it. So
Interesting.
it's, yeah. Whereas Zach will now go and get a banana, peel it, and eat it, no problems. But yes, like when they were little, if you chopped up a banana, put it on a plate, Ryan would be like, he'd sort of like point at it with his finger, but he would never actually pick it up and eat it. So
Yeah.
I guess there's just so many aspects of it, and it's just really individual. But that's probably the
Yeah.
way that you'd, yeah, look at them.
Here in the US, I think we would say profound autism. Used to be called
Oh
severe,
yes,
but I think we
yeah.
say profound now.
Mm,
But you're right, it just looks different in
mm.
every individual because you don't even get the behaviors with every person with
No,
profound
that's right.
level 3 autism.
Mm, yeah.
So you mentioned something prior to us jumping on the podcast and hitting the record button that I thought was interesting. I wanted to explore with you a little bit. You said that your husband was the caregiver and you were working. How did you come to that decision in your family, that breakdown of support needs?
Yeah. So before the boys were diagnosed, Tony wanted to be home with Kate before she went to school. He wanted to have some time at home with her. And
Mhm.
so I went back to work full time when Kate was, well, just that year before she started school. And then the following year, the boys were diagnosed. And I guess we sort of almost fell into it in a way that my work, I could be quite flexible because we were extremely lucky and able to get into an early intervention um, group that or organization that ran play groups where you could go, but they would actually, the educators would have activities for them to do. And
Right.
because we had the two of them, it was sort of easy to have one each, like one work
Mhm.
with one boy each. So I was actually able to go to that weekly in like the school terms. And financially, I earned more than what my husband would if he had gone back to work.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, it just stayed that way. And yeah, and we just continued that way. So I have to say, sometimes I would have liked to have stayed home with them. There are other days that I was really glad to go to work.
I totally get that for sure. So your book centers around, and your teaching and training centers around, two main themes, right? The importance of early childhood education and advocacy. So talk to me a little bit about that, importance of early childhood education.
I guess I've always been passionate about that because you can see that difference, and I come from a very play-based
Yes.
theory, because
Yeah,
that's what we are in early childhood, and you
right.
could see the difference that it makes, with the children that you would work with, just general every day, but that engagement with those children that do have a disability, that you go to therapy and it's usually quite often play based anyway. So it's just that joy and that learning, and that's it's how they learn. And I still love playing with the kids, so probably very biased there as well. So, if I could have just spent all day playing with them and not having to do all that paperwork that you have to do, I'd be quite happy.
For sure.
Sorry, what's the second part of the question?
What
I've
kind of
forgotten.
support do the early childhood educators need, though, in order to feel confident in what they're delivering for services to children?
Yeah, they need to have um, a basic understanding of the disability, because if you don't understand what's happening, why children might be behaving in certain ways, or I know we had a child who was peg fed, and we needed to have training on that before the educators were confident to do that. So they need a lot of communication from the families, as well as any other professionals that are involved, because we would also quite often have the educators from the early childhood, like the early intervention service,
Mm-hmm.
come in and talk to us and work with us on how to support that child the best. So it's
Right.
that, I guess, working together with other therapists. Sometimes we would have, the speech therapists come in and actually do a session in the service, so that they could see how the children were communicating with us, but it also gave them a chance to, because especially around a social thing, that they could see the child interacting with other children. They could involve the other children in a game and show them how to communicate
Mm-hmm.
with the child. So I think it's that, I guess, that integrated model of how to support that child. So surrounding that
Yeah.
child with
Yeah.
all
I
of
love that.
those therapists, and just sharing the knowledge that you have.
Yeah. The thing about early childhood education is that it's very family focused, which is so different than when kids get to primary school, right? It's so different. And not only that, but they work as a team. They work in a team environment. Again, very different than the next level of education. And so I can see why you and anybody would be passionate about working in that space, because we know that teams make a big difference, and focusing on the family makes a big difference in a child's life. So I love that. And I love that you really are interested and involved in this evolution of, pushing this through beyond the early childhood space. Um, I have one more question, and it's, if you don't want to talk about this, it's okay. But as a mom of a profoundly disabled child myself, I will talk uh, often about the impact on siblings. And I want to know a little bit about Kate. She's an older sister to two profoundly disabled boys, only 3 years apart between them. What advice would you give to parents who want to really be thoughtful? I mean, we all do, but just to help
Mm,
them be more thoughtful about the sibling experience.
yeah. I think for us it was a little bit easy, because when we knew we were expecting the boys and they were twins, we always talked about how we'd make sure that she still had her identity, that we still had, did things with her and apart, from the boys. Because I think twins are sort of a they just draw more attention anyway. Like people go, oh,
Right.
you've got twins, and that sort of thing. So I think I guess, started with that mindset. Um,
Good.
and then we were just extremely lucky that the early intervention service that we went to, they also had a siblings group. So
Nice.
we made sure, she was able to go to that and enjoy that. She really enjoyed her little athletics, so we'd make sure that she went to all of the carnivals and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So, Tony and the boys would stay home. I'd be driving around New South Wales taking her to different things. So we just
Yeah.
made sure that she did have something apart from
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. For us, it was
Um,
dance. I totally get
yeah,
it. And I was driving all over hither and yon with the dance troupe. Totally get it.
yeah. So, and I think you just need to make sure that they've got that outlet. And she was, I think because Tony used to take the boys, because our Kate's school was very, very, very close. Like when she started school, so Tony would walk her to school. In that first year, have the boys in the pram, so all her friends got to know them. And then once they were diagnosed, and then sort of started the different behaviours, you could see
Mhm.
they were behaving differently as they got older. We would just explain it as, they might say, oh, why do they do that? Or why can't they do that? And we'd say, oh, their brain works differently from yours.
Mhm.
And sort of those early primary years, that was probably just enough. They just went, oh, okay. So I think for her friends were quite accepting of them because they knew them. They'd sort of grown up with them in a way as well. And she had one friend who was just amazing. She always wanted to come and stay at our house, spend time at our house. I was like, why? It's a complete not a madhouse. What are you doing? Um, and so we actually ended up calling her our second daughter because she was, just such a part of the family, and she saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I guess just once she was a teenager, we went through that teenage stuff, and it was, you know, a lot of frustration, and they were different, and we just, I guess, just worked through that with her, made sure that she still had her things to do, and now she's the most amazing advocate for them. um she's been totally thoroughly involved in them moving out, helping us to choose who they'd be with. When she can, she'll attend meetings for them, whether it's an NDIS review, or any of the funding sort of meetings we had to have, or things like that. um
Wonderful.
yeah, so
So
we're
she's
very
in
lucky now.
training. She's getting her on the job training for, you know,
Yeah, and
eventually
her
to
work,
succeed you.
now involves working with people with a disability. She's an exercise
Of course.
physiologist, and there's an amazing program called Autism Swim, and she's been doing that as part of her work, and all the families just rave about how good she is because she just gets it. So
So many
she's
of our
just
kids just end up in those helping professions. It's just
mm,
amazing the percentage of siblings that end up in some sort of helping profession.
mm. And they're
Because
perfect for it.
they are, yeah.
Mm,
I do know some who kind of turn away from that, but it's a small percentage, and they bring something so special to the table, you know. I just
absolutely.
have one more question for you. I noticed that you are very passionate about the Indigenous population as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what that looks like in your work?
So I guess that started when I guess I've just always had an interest in Aboriginal culture and history. And then when I was director at one of the childcare centres, I wanted to bring that into the service, and it was probably something that hadn't been done at that stage. So I connected with some of the local elders here, and was able to get them to come in. Um, there was different funding streams that I applied for. So,
Mhm.
even back then, either whether it was for the children or for that, and so they became almost like are part of the centre, and the children and the educators as well. It was very interesting to see how their perspectives changed and the relationships that they grew with those elders that came in. And then now I'm currently working with one of the organisations here just to help support the Indigenous families that are finding it hard to access either the NDIS or to they might have an NDIS plan, but they just don't know,
Yeah.
what to ask for, what to say in those review meetings, which is hard.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. There
always
can be so many
tricky.
cultural barriers, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we find that obviously in the US, our melting pot here,
Mm.
it can be very difficult in different cultures to access services, and not just from a language perspective, but from a perspective of the way people look at different
Yes.
supports.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So I really enjoy doing that as well. So, yeah, it's all part of
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to get your book, and I'm going to have a link to it. Didn't because of the mistake and the problem that I had, folks, I did not have a chance to read it ahead of time of this meeting. And those of you who know me know that I like to be prepared for things. So this is a little bit on the fly. I hope that you have enjoyed meeting Jenny as much as I have. And before we leave, do you have a, one sort of overarching piece of advice for parents as they are on this journey from diagnosis to transition to adulthood? What would you say?
Oh, wow, that's a big,
I know it's a
big
big
question.
ask, right?
I think probably just acceptance, like accept where you are and what's happening. I think
Mm,
that was one of the hardest things. And for a long time, maybe not so much Tony, but I was trying to get the boys to where they should be. And maybe that's an early childhood thing that I was like, oh, the next milestone, the next
yeah,
milestone. And oh, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And I think just, yeah, once I got to that acceptance of, well, they are who they are,
right.
they're doing the best that they can. And just looking at those unique little quirks and
Mm,
personalities that they have and just
yeah.
going, well,
Enjoy.
that's
Just
them.
just
Yes.
enjoy where you are right now. I have this
Yeah.
slogan on my wall that says, "Don't look backwards. You're not going that way." And it's easy to get lost in the what's behind you and what's all the way down the road in front of you instead of really enjoying your moment. And the
Mm.
thing is, that many parents don't realize, you can't tell your kids to be happy and have a good life. You have to model that for them. You have to
Yes.
show them what that means to actually
Mm.
be happy and smile and enjoy your life. And so that's very hard for all of us. I mean, we're when we are raising children with disabilities, especially profound disabilities, there's so many things and everything can't get done. It's an
Mm.
impossible feat to do
Yes.
everything. So acceptance is a very cool message. Just accept
Mm.
where you are. That doesn't mean don't stop striving or trying for
Oh,
the right
no,
thing,
no, that's
but
right.
really just be in the moment. Be in the moment
Mm.
with your kids and yourself and your partner. And yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you since it's so early in the morning there for you. And
Thank you.
and we will let everybody know how they can reach you.
Beautiful. Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's great to meet you. Thank you.
Great to meet you too. Thank you.